All right, rock and roll. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Angular Template Syntax. So I want to go over a couple of things that you can do in templates, especially conditional logic and iteration. Maybe we can talk about some conditional binding as well. And really, if you we'll maybe talk about references also. If you can do all of those, that's probably most of what you need to know how to do in a template. So if you'd be so kind, go ahead and scaffold out a new Angular app that you can play with. I will do the same. So while all that's installing, let's go over a couple things. Oops. So Angular uses this concept called directives, which are like augmentations for HTML tags. The ones that you got to have right under your fingers. *ngif. And its variants for else if and else. And you got to know ng4. It's capital. These two, that's bread and butter. You're doing that pretty much all the time. The else if and else have the worst syntax of any of the SPA frameworks. Again, I'm still pretty new to this, so I got to look this up. Ngif. Let's pull up the docs. Well, that's like the actual. No. There we go. Ngif. All right, so that's like the basic syntax for that. The one with, you have to do a template statement. Let's see if it's in here. There we go. All right, so else we do with this if statement and a thing called a reference. Let's make sure we get references in here. And then conditional binding. There's one other thing that like we might need to touch on, which is the async pipe. I guess just pipes in general. Oh, one more, interpolation. But you probably won't need to use those that much. In fact, I think it's generally a better practice to do a lot of that kind of transformation in your class file itself. Like pipes are kind of neat, kind of sort of, but no other framework has them, and I don't know. I don't think they lack for it. All right, so let's start talking about these. This first one is in string interpolation. So you can do most JavaScript expressions with these. Can't do every JavaScript expression with these, but you can do a lot of them. So let's go to the Angular app that you've hopefully scaffolded out by now. And go ahead and follow along with me. I'm going to start up the server. That's not how you spell that. I'm going to head over to the app component HTML file. Delete all the boilerplate. Open up the app component TS file. Get rid of that title. Let's take a second to get caught up. You should have an empty app component HTML file and a pretty plain app component TS file. You can verify that it works by putting something over here, and then hopefully we can see that show up there. So, string interpolation. If I put a public property in this component, I'll call it message. Then I can use that message over here like this. So if I do that, it still shows up. I could change it to something else in the component, and that's reflected here. We can also use that with basically anything that wants a string. So, for example, I could also use that for an image, and I could set its source that way, or its alt tag that way. So go ahead and look up some kind of image. Oh, all this talk about weddings and anniversaries and what have you. How could I say no to that? Grab some URL and make it a public property over here. Come up with some alt text. Notice that these go inside of the quotes. If I do all that, hey, there's my buddy. String interpolation. Questions about this? Let's compare this to other frameworks. Oops, that's for like. Let's see. Oh, hey, what do you know? It's exactly the same. Weird. It is a little bit different with attributes. How do you do it in React? Oh, it uses one curly instead of two. Weird. Pretty universal idea. String interpolation. All right, let's talk about Ngif. Actually, one more thing I want to talk about. I've noted these have to be public properties. If you don't make them public properties, template can't see them. All right. So ngif. Probably the most useful use of ngif is if something is not defined, don't display something. So for example, this image thing. If that image URL isn't defined, I probably don't want to show the image tag. So I can ngif image URL. Note that that's not in curlies. Once you're in a directive like this, that's looking up a property or something on the actual class. So if that's set, show it. That means if I hide it, oops. Make it some kind of falsy value, doesn't show up. It's not even in the DOM. You can see it's hidden there. Switch those back. There it is. Questions about that?
So that was like our is new for wine
Exactly.
flicks.
If that is new property is present, then show this component or element or whatever.
Can the conditions be more complicated than whether or not the property is there?
Totally. So it could be something like image URL matches that. Why is it mad at me? Oh, this is a string. Note that anytime, okay, so we're supposed to use double quotes every time we're using like HTML attributes. So that means if we're doing an expression in here that has a string, we have to use single quotes. Like so. All right, and there's my buddy. Now, if I tried to have another cute puppy, actually, I'm over it with the puppies. Let's do cute guinea pigs. Oh, these little pals. Here's what they look like. Being little buddies. So then if I try to make the image URL that, doesn't show up at all. Versus, if I just check whether or not it's there, there's some buds. could check that it's a specific thing. I could check that it's in some list. I could check that it has some length. Any of those things. It doesn't even need to be related to the thing that you're showing. It just needs to be some expression that evaluates to a truthy or falsy value. Other questions? Cool. Let's talk about else. So before we talk about else, we need to talk about refs. Refs exist in all of the front-end frameworks. I think they're probably the most powerful in Angular. The idea of a ref is a variable that represents the underlying DOM element that you can do something with. So the way that you make a ref, I'll make an input tag. I'm going to give it a ref of, I don't know, greeting. So the octothorpe, what the kids call a hash, is how you add a reference to an element. And then what's cool is we can use that reference anywhere else in the template. So I could have a paragraph here that's set to whatever greeting is, whatever greeting's value is. Check this out. So over here, oh, come on, it's supposed to auto update. Why are you making me look dumb in front of my friends? Maybe it wants me to make sure that's like semantically correct. Type, text. Oh man, could have sworn I did that right. All right, let's debug it. Oops, first I want to check if that else. Cool. Where are the references? There we go. Yeah, like that. Yeah, like that. And I could have sworn I could bind that to a display thing. Maybe not. Maybe I have to do it in one of these. All right, I'll play with that in a sec. The idea is still that you can add a reference to some element. So, for example, if I want to do an else for this, so I have some condition, like let's say maybe I'm logged in. Is logged in equals true. And then over here, I can make this is logged in. So if the user's logged in, then I want to see my piggies. And then if I want another image that I show if they're not logged in, that might be something like alternate image URL. And I can add a reference to that. And then for alternate image URL, about those puppies from earlier. And then the syntax is else alternate. And it's going to want me to wrap this in an ng template. Property alternate. Man, why is it having a hard time finding that? Property alternate does not exist on type app component. Yeah, but it's right here. All right, let's get to the bottom of it. Like I said, I'm kind of new at this too. We'll figure it out. Nope. Nope. Template variables. Good God. I don't know. I really don't like the Angular docs. I love the TypeScript docs. They're both Microsoft, but I don't think the Angular ones. They got stuff split up all over the place. Let's see, so Angular if else. No, but like the real ones. Okay, a condition, a reference. Oh, I got to put the reference on the template. That's why. See, little things. All right, so now moment of truth. I change that to false. Dog. Change it to true. Piggies. Questions?
If you wouldn't mind just hanging out here for just a sec.
I'd love to.
Yeah, I'm only just now catching up. Sorry about that, guys.
You're fine. This is what we're here to do.
Yeah, you're good. I'm also catching up. It's like this. It's this machine, man. It keeps stuttering.
Yeah.
So the else alternate, is it on your line 2? Is that able to just associate directly to line 4, or is it something else going on there?
It needs to do it through this template. So you're saying if this condition is true, show the element that I wrote this on. Otherwise, show the element that this references. That references this ng template, which contains this. This is like an empty placeholder kind of thing.
Can I see your TS file whenever or your TypeScript file whenever?
I got 2 image URLs, a message, and some alt text. And hey, you know what? The alt text kind of works for both of those pictures. And the is logged in Boolean.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
What else?
So for mine, I'm getting a bunch of errors saying that it's not. Nope, no, it's just catching up. Sorry.
More questions about if and else.
So just talking it out, you got an ngif, and you're looking for the is logged in property, and you put the else, you know, whatever. So in this case, it's alternate within the quotes, and then you have to create an ng template with the pound sign that matches that word that follows else. In this case, alternate, and then you put the other condition within the ng template.
No, this isn't a condition. This is just another element that I want to show.
Oh, yeah. So if
all of the
logged in
conditional
is
logic is here.
right. Okay, I think I follow.
And alternate be any name, or is that something that's built in?
Still works.
Thank you.
More questions? These references come up in forms a little bit also. It's how you refer to another element. Cool. Let's talk about ng4. So we have an array of things. We can iterate through those and make something show up as a result. Now, I would say 95% of the time, you should probably be iterating over a list item. Because semantically, that matches up. If it's something you iterate over, that's a list. LIs are what we use for lists, right? So like most of the time, those kind of like directly coincide. So let's make a list over here of piggies. And we'll do an array of objects. So this will be Bixby, Harmony, and Mesa. Oops, nope. These have to have names. That's right. Come on. Just said we were doing objects. All right, so I have this array of objects. Take a sec to get caught up. If I want to iterate over those piggies, I could make an unordered list and make a list item. And I could say something like star ng4 let piggy of piggies, and then inside of this I could do piggy dot name. So if I do that, loops through the piggies. Piggies could have been some nested part of an object. So if instead of having piggies here, this was like, say I made a getter called, you don't need to type along with this part, but if I made a getter that was like return some response like that, then the only thing that changes is this would be HTTP response dot some response dot piggies. Otherwise, it's exactly the same. So this needs to be some array. That's the same looping syntax that we were doing in Unit 2. Let item of list. And now the way that scoping works on this is a little bit confusing. Piggy is available on this element and anything that's inside of this element. So I can use it as part of the template. I can also use it in other things over here. So we'll talk about class binding in a second, but if I had something like class.isActive, I could set that equal to piggy.name equals Bixby. That's legit. And if I went to app component CSS and made like an isActive class where the color is red, Bixby gets this class bound to her. Hey, that's pretty hard to read. So we can do that thing that we did in Unit 1. Break this up a little bit.
Can you show your typed script again, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I got a hard-coded array here. This was just demonstrating that you can also do that as part of some nested data structure. Other questions about loops?
Not a question about loops, but I'm actually getting some weird error saying that my image and list tags aren't being terminated.
Then you probably don't have a closing tag. Probably missing one of those somewhere. If it's not immediately obvious, why don't you screen share? Let's take a look.
Sure.
Uh-oh, My Zoom's being weird. Can you kick me off, or will it not let you?
I don't know.
Are you talking about his screen share? Because I see it right now.
Oh, I don't. Come on, Coberly.
Is it choppy as all hell?
No, I just can't get out of mine. All right, well, you guys work on that. I'm gonna see.
I mean, if anyone can see why
Hey,
it
Sean,
wouldn't
on
use-
on line 8, get rid of the quote after is logged in.
All needs
Recording
to
in
be within the
progress.
quotes.
I see. Okay, and so that's probably going to be the same thing on here for the 4, isn't it? No. No.
No,
No.
You're trying to locate the name property on the entire array of wizards. So you just need to have the singular wizard.name.
I see. So if it's that.
Now, in your TypeScript file, do you have an array of wizards?
Yeah.
ng4 equals.
Sorry. And then
Get rid of
doesn't exist. It's
Get rid of the extra quotes.
That right after ng4. Yeah.
There you go.
oh, but it's still doing that one.
I don't know if that
Okay,
extra
cool.
space matters. Oh, yeah, there you go.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. I appreciate that. Sorry about that.
All right.
Kyle, you're like super distant.
I am. Like sound wise.
You're getting better.
I hear you fine.
All right.
I had a question about looping, mostly just like so you have this loop now. If there is another component inside the list item,
Yeah.
you can't use like piggy.name anymore, right? Unless.
Oh no, you totally can.
Okay.
So this li could have anything inside of it, and piggy is going to be in scope for all of it. So if I had a whole hierarchy of other stuff in here, including components, I can do one-way binding with piggy.name. If piggy has an array, so like I could nest the loop even. So let's say each one of these has parents of Gopher and Tila, and Harmony has Badger and Wilco, and Mesa has Boogie and Teal. All right, so now each one of those piggy objects also has an array in it. You can also loop over that. So you could say something like that, and then this might be ng4 equals let parent of piggy.parents. And then this could be like, could use things from both of them. Could use like piggy.names parents are, or I'd say like one of piggy's.names parents is parent. And yeah, like again, that could be components, that can be anything that we can do in Angular. I can also do conditionals in here, anything.
So you said that NG4 is used most of the time for list items. Can you use it for images, or what else can you use it for?
You could use it for anything, but semantically, if it's a list of things, those are list items. So if you had a list of images, you would iterate through a bunch of list items and then put images in each of the list items.
Okay.
More questions about iteration in templates? Cool. So let's talk about class bindings. Angular has an official syntax for this. React not so much. Vue has an official syntax for this. I think Angular's is pretty elegant. It's not quite as good as Vue's, but it's pretty good. The idea is that I can have an isActive class that is bound to this condition. So if this condition is truthy, isActive gets applied to that element. You should absolutely do that instead of trying to use like template interpolation inside of the class. This is a similar kind of idea of like me barking at you to use class list rather than directly assigning the class string back in like unit 2. Same kind of idea here. Manage all of that with this. You can bind more than one class, not a problem. You can also bind an entire object. So if you just bind class by itself and make this an object, like I would rewrite that as isActive that's the same thing, except I could do more conditions for that. Like that. You can also do this with attributes. So the difference is instead of starting with class, you start with attr. So you could like disable inputs that way. Most of the time, I think doing what we did with like this image where you just use string interpolation, that covers like 80% of your cases for trying to use dynamic values inside of HTML attributes. The rest of the time, you can use attr. But probably most of what you'll do is binding classes. You can also bind styles. That's sloppy. Don't bind your styles in here. Put those styles in classes and then bind the class.
So originally when you had class.isActive,
yeah,
that's going to give the isActive class to the piggy who has the name that is Bixby.
Ding, ding,
right?
ding, ding, ding.
Okay.
Yeah, because this is being iterated over. And so it's whichever LI matches that. It doesn't need to be done in a loop. You could have also done it with any of these. But if you have a class or an attribute that should show up in some circumstances, but not in others, that's the logic for that.
Cool. Getting some ideas for the light bulb exercise here.
Hell yeah.
Speaking of the light bulb exercise, I did something kind of different. I don't know if it's correct. I used ng class with a property, and then if the property is true, it's set to one class, and if it's false, it sets it to a different class.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a more advanced directive for this. But yeah, I don't have any problem with that.
And just to clarify, I'm sorry, is active as a Boolean that you set up in your class on your TS file?
No, that is
Okay.
a great question, because it sort of looks like that would be the case.
It's a styling.
This is
on
the
the
name
style
of the
sheet.
class. It's the actual name of the class itself. The thing you're setting it equal to can look up something on your class, but like that's the condition. The isActive class gets applied to every element where that condition is true.
And if none are true, then that class doesn't even get applied at all.
Correct. So yeah, if I just make that, nobody's going to get that. Or all of them are going to get it.
When they all got it, is it because they all evaluate to like a truthy value?
Yeah. So
Okay.
if I do that, every single one of these LIs is going to get evaluate to true for isActive. So all of them end up with an isActive class.
And that's because they're like all of the things in that list are truthy, right? Because they actually have like strings that have text in them.
No, it's because this is true. I just hard coded it to be true for every single one of them.
Oh, okay. I was misunderstanding. I got it now.
But yeah, that gave all three of these the isActive class. If I make it false, none of them have it.
Can I see your TypeScript file again?
Totally.
Thank you.
May I have this dance? Stupid. Other questions about class binding? Pardon me, I've fallen in love.
So the one, sorry. Go
Brad
ahead, Parnell.
first.
Okay, so the one-way binding is only for the classes, like for the CSS selectors, or is it for other things as well?
So this isn't one-way binding.
Okay.
I mean, it kind of is. It's not really the same way that we've been doing it before, where we're like passing it in as an input to another component. Uses the same syntax and is a binding, but probably better to separate that in your head from the like actual one-way binding that we do with components.
Okay.
Even though it has a lot of things in common with it. There's only so many characters on the keyboard, so they get reused for stuff. More questions about class binding?
If the thing you're binding to is already Boolean, like for example, is logged in true,
Yeah.
do you have to set it like explicitly equal to true or false in your binding, or?
Nope. We can just do that. Just needs to be a truthy value.
I think the fun part of all of this is figuring out when to use the curly brackets and when not to.
So you mean like this for the string interpolation?
Yeah, versus like when you did the class is active, is logged in,
Gotcha.
although that's a property, there's no curly brackets.
Got it. So here's your shorthand for it. If it's inside of some tags, it's always the curlies. There's like nothing else you would do. I'm trying to think if that's always going to be true. That is always going to be true. If it's inside tags, double curlies. Handlebars, we call them. If it's in properties, it's because we're using it the exact same way. So like this image source here, there's no real Angular magic happening. We're just pasting that value in there. I even had to put the double quotes around it because this is like search and replace kind of stuff. It's going to replace those handlebars with that text directly. Those are the 2 times you use the handlebars.
So it's, I mean, pretty much just when we want to append something to the page. Otherwise, we want like a certain property, checking if the property is there or not or something, pretty much.
So yeah, if you're like checking a property or something, I mean, I guess you can do arbitrary stuff in here. So for example, you could, instead of doing your ng if else like this, you could probably just ternary this. So like that would be something like this. So instead of doing this ng if else, we could do like is logged in ternary. And then get rid of this stuff altogether. I'll bet that works. So now it's that. Now it's that. Yeah. So you can do JavaScript expressions in these too. But the ultimate goal of like everything I was doing there was to figure out what text to put in this source attribute. Even if I'm writing a complicated expression, the goal is still to do a pretty simple thing. Just search and replace some handlebars with whatever the current value is. Now, all of this other stuff, this is doing logic. Looping, that's more complicated than just search and replace. Conditional logic, it's more complicated than just search and replace. Alternate things to display, that's a little bit, that's logic to it. Versus what string am I supposed to display? So here's another like tool that you can use to figure out which one you're supposed to be using. Notice that source and alt are HTML attributes. There's nothing special Angular-wise about either of them. That's the same stuff we were doing in Unit 1. ngIf, that's an Angular thing. ng4, that's an Angular thing. Class binding, that's an Angular thing. If you're doing an Angular thing, the stuff in the quotes plays by like Angular rules. So we're not doing like string interpolation inside these, although I think technically you can. This is like pure JavaScript, and your variables are whatever public properties and methods are available on that class TS file. So that's the case there. That's the case there. That's the case here. That's the case there. But like you wouldn't do that because it's already you're already writing JavaScript. You don't need to turn it into a JavaScript variable. It already is.
That actually makes sense when you break it down like that.
Hey, it's my job. I love it. More questions? All right, are we feeling a little bit better about Angular template syntax now? Yes, no, maybe so? All right, I'm seeing some nods and some thumbs ups. Cool. Enjoy lunch when we get back. I think we're talking about services. So until then, sayonara.